What just happened in court should scare every single person who still believes in accountability, because Donald Trump and his legal team may have just pulled off something extraordinary. Not in the sense of brilliance, but in the sense of corruption. Evidence tied to Jeffrey Epstein, evidence that could potentially expose connections and powerful names, has just been buried. Yes, buried in plain sight inside a courtroom, where Trump's lawyers managed to seal away documents and testimonies that the public had every right to see. And if you think this is just about hold scandals or gossip, think again. Because what we just witnessed is a perfect example of how the justice system bends, or gets bent, when you have money, power, and the willingness to play dirty. So, what exactly happened in court? Why did it matter? And what does this move tell us not just about Trump, but about the lengths people in power will go to protect themselves? So, here's the part that really catches everyone's attention. Why would Trump, of all people, be working so hard to make sure Epstein-related evidence stays buried? Think about it. This isn't some random document dump or obscure filing hidden in a dusty corner of the justice system. This is Jeffrey Epstein we're talking about, a man whose name is synonymous with one of the darkest scandals in modern history. A man who had connections with billionaires, politicians, royals, and celebrities across the globe. And here's Trump in the middle of a legal battle, pushing to keep key information under wraps. If you're asking yourself why, you're not alone. Millions of Americans are asking that exact question right now. Because when evidence gets sealed in cases like this, it doesn't just vanish into thin air, it vanishes from public accountability. And when accountability disappears, that's when democracy starts to rot from the inside. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Trump's legal team isn't just passively letting this happen. They're actively maneuvering to delay, to stall, and to make sure that what's buried stays buried. And that raises the bigger question, what exactly is in those documents? Who's implicated? And why is it such a threat that it can't be made public? You don't go to great lengths to hide something if it's harmless. People don't spend millions of dollars on lawyers just to keep paperwork out of sight unless that paperwork has teeth. Serious, dangerous teeth. And while Trump's team may spin this as just another witch hunt or claim it's irrelevant, the timing and the tactics tell a very different story. This isn't about irrelevance. This is about protection. Protection of Trump. Protection of his allies. Protection of a network that thrives in the shadows. And let's be honest here, this is classic Trump strategy. We've seen this playbook before. When there's damaging information, Trump doesn't confront it head on. He buries it, he delays it, or he distracts from it. Remember how he handled his tax returns. Years of excuses, court battles, deflections, all while claiming there was nothing to hide. If there's truly nothing to hide, why go to such extraordinary lengths to keep it out of sight? The same question applies here. If the Epstein documents don't contain anything damaging to Trump, then why fight so hard to keep them sealed? It doesn't add up. Unless, of course, the documents do contain something that could expose him in ways we haven't fully seen yet. And let's not forget what this means for the bigger picture. This isn't just about Trump as an individual. This is about power. This is about a system where the wealthy and the well-connected can manipulate the rules to protect themselves, while the rest of us would never have that luxury. Imagine for a moment if this were anyone else, if it were you or me or an ordinary American. Would the courts bend over backwards to keep potentially explosive evidence sealed? Would delays and loopholes be weaponized to protect us? Absolutely not. And that's the real story here. The burying of Epstein evidence is more than a courtroom maneuver. It's a glaring example of a double standard that benefits the powerful at the expense of truth. Now here's the part that really gnaws at you once this evidence is sealed, once it's tucked away behind legal technicalities, there's a very real chance it never sees the light of day. That means the public may never know the full extent of Epstein's connections or who exactly was complicit in the crimes he facilitated. And if Trump succeeds here, it doesn't just keep the truth hidden, it signals to every powerful figure connected to Epstein that they too are safe. That accountability can be avoided. That secrets can stay secrets as long as you have enough influence to bury them. And when people start to believe that the truth can always be buried, what does that do to faith in our institutions? What does that do to democracy itself? This is why Trump's role here is so dangerous. It's not just about him, it's about creating a culture where burying evidence becomes normal, where legal systems are manipulated not to protect the people, but to shield the elites. And once that culture takes root, it's nearly impossible to undo. Because if the public loses faith that justice can be applied equally, that powerful people can be held accountable, then the entire foundation of our democracy begins to crumble. That's not hyperbole, that's history. We've seen it happen before in countries where corruption takes over, where secrecy replaces transparency, and where power protects itself at all costs. So when Trump succeeds in burying Epstein evidence, it's not just a story about sealed documents. It's a story about how power works in America. It's a story about how truth gets suffocated by legal gamesmanship. And it's a story about how one man, who has built his entire career on escaping accountability, is once again proving that the rules are different for him. But the most important question we have to ask is, for how long? How long can truth be buried before it forces its way back to the surface? How long can accountability be dodged before it becomes impossible to ignore? And how long will the American people allow this kind of manipulation to define our justice system? When you hear that Donald Trump has managed to bury Epstein evidence in court, the first question that comes to mind is obvious: what exactly is he hiding? Because let's be honest, people don't spend their time and money fighting to keep irrelevant documents sealed. They don't go through endless legal motions, delay tactics, and courtroom maneuvers just to protect papers that say nothing at all. The very act of trying to keep something out of public view tells you that it matters. It tells you that inside those files, inside those depositions, inside those testimonies, there's something that could shift the narrative, something that could damage reputations, something that could completely unravel the carefully constructed image Trump wants to present as he runs for president again. So let's talk about what might be inside those records. We know Epstein wasn't just a private citizen. He was a man who cultivated a network of influence that touched the highest levels of politics, media, business, and even royalty. His entire operation depended on access, on trust, on the ability to bring people into his orbit and keep them there. And Trump, by his own admission, knew Epstein. He was photographed with him. He was recorded speaking about him. He once said that Epstein likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. That's not a rumor. That's Trump, in his own words. And while he later tried to distance himself when Epstein was arrested, the record is undeniable. Trump was in that circle. He was connected. Now imagine what records from Epstein's world could reveal. We're talking about flight logs, travel records, visitor lists, testimony from victims or associates, correspondence, emails, photographs, connections drawn through sworn depositions. Even a single mention of Trump's name in the wrong context could be politically devastating. And remember, it doesn't have to prove criminality to matter. It only has to prove proximity. It only has to raise the question of what Trump knew, when he knew it, and why he was there. That's enough to shake trust. That's enough to dominate headlines. That's enough to throw his entire campaign narrative into chaos. And that is why Trump wants it sealed. Because in politics, perception is power. He doesn't need a smoking gun that says, Trump did X. He just needs silence. He needs plausible deniability. He needs the ability to say, fake news, without the risk of a sworn document contradicting him. The longer those records stay hidden, the longer he gets to control the story. The longer he gets to tell his followers, there's nothing to see here, while making sure they never get the chance to see for themselves. Let's not forget the victims in this story. The people whose lives were destroyed by Epstein's network, the people who have spent years demanding that the truth be exposed, that every enabler, every participant, every person who looked the other way be held accountable. When the records are buried, their voices are buried too. Their chance at full justice, their chance to confront the powerful who enabled Epstein, is delayed once again. And Trump is contributing to that silence, not by defending the victims, not by demanding transparency, but by aligning himself with secrecy. Some people might ask, well, what if Trump's name isn't in the documents? What if this is just paranoia? That's exactly the kind of argument Trump's team wants you to make. But here's the reality. If his name wasn't in there, if there was truly nothing that tied him to Epstein, beyond what we already know, why fight so hard? Why not welcome transparency, release the records, and prove everyone wrong? That's what an innocent person confident in their position would do. Instead, Trump has chosen the opposite path, the path of concealment. And concealment is not the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. This move also has to be understood in the context of Trump's broader legal and political strategy. He is drowning in trials, indictments, investigations. He is trying to frame himself as the victim of a deep state conspiracy, as a martyr being unfairly persecuted. The Epstein records blow a hole in that story because they're not about the DOJ or the FBI or Joe Biden. They're about Epstein, a man Trump was undeniably close to. They're about a history that predates all the current political excuses. They're about a reality Trump can't blame on anyone else. And so the only option left is to bury it. But burying evidence doesn't erase it. It just delays it. And the timing here is crucial. Trump knows that if these records were to surface before the election, it could be devastating. So every motion his team files, every argument they make, is designed to push the release date further and further away. He's not fighting forever. He's fighting for now. He just needs silence long enough to get through November. After that, if he wins, he can stack the courts, influence the DOJ, and make sure the evidence never sees the light of day. And if he loses, well, at least it didn't cost him votes. That's the calculation. That's the game. And let's be clear, this isn't just about Trump. Every name in those records, every person of influence who had a tie to Epstein, benefits when the evidence stays sealed. This isn't one man's secret. It's a system's secret. It's a club of powerful people across politics, media, and business who would much rather the world forget about Epstein entirely. Trump isn't protecting only himself, he's protecting a network. And that should terrify anyone who still believes that truth and justice actually matter. Because here's the bottom line. Democracy can't survive without transparency. Justice can't survive without accountability. And when people like Trump succeed at burying evidence tied to one of the most notorious predators in modern history, what it signals is that the powerful are still untouchable, that the rules still don't apply, that for all the talk of fairness, the system bends to those who can afford to manipulate it. So what's in the Epstein records that Trump doesn't want us to see? Maybe it's flight logs. Maybe it's testimonies. Maybe it's photographs. Maybe it's something as simple as his name in a place it shouldn't be. The specifics don't even matter as much as the fact that we're not allowed to know. And that's the point. Silence protects the powerful. Secrecy shields them. And once again, Trump is proving that when forced to choose between transparency and self-preservation, he will always choose himself. And that's why this story matters. Not because it's tabloid, not because it's gossip, but because it shows us exactly how far Trump will go to bury the truth, how much the system allows him to get away with, and how much accountability is still missing in American politics. And as long as those records remain sealed, the victims wait, the truth waits, and we wait. The only people who win are the people who have the most to hide. If you really want to understand what Trump is doing by burying Epstein evidence, you have to look at the strategy behind it. Because this isn't just some random legal move in a vacuum. It's part of a larger pattern, a playbook Trump has used over and over again to escape accountability. And the key word here is delay. Trump doesn't fight to win in court the way most people think of winning. He fights to push things off, to drag them out, to bury them under technicalities until the story dies down, the news cycle moves on, and the political costs disappear. That's the real win for him. He doesn't need to clear his name, he just needs to run out the clock. Think about it. Every time Trump has faced scrutiny, he's leaned on this same tactic. When investigators wanted his tax returns, he fought all the way to the Supreme Court just to delay their release. He didn't care if the courts eventually forced him to hand them over, because by the time they did, years had passed, elections had happened, and the public interest had shifted. When Congress demanded documents about January 6, he didn't cooperate, he claimed privilege, he dragged it out, he filed appeals, and even when he lost, the process took so long that by the time the material came out, the urgency had already faded. This is what Trump understands better than almost anyone in politics. Time kills scandals. People move on, outrage fades, and as long as he can stall, he can survive. Now he's using the exact same playbook with Epstein. The goal isn't to permanently erase the records. He probably can't. The goal is to make sure they don't see the light of day while he's on the ballot. Because Trump knows the stakes. He knows that if Epstein-related evidence surfaces during the campaign, it will dominate the news cycle. It will throw him off message. It will connect him back to a man whose name has become synonymous with abuse, corruption, and predatory power. And it will undercut the story he's trying to sell to voters, that he's the outsider fighting the corrupt elite. The last thing he needs is to be tied to Epstein's world in black and white court documents. So what does Trump do? He buries. He files motions to seal the evidence, arguing it's irrelevant or prejudicial. He claims it would hurt his right to a fair trial. He uses every excuse in the book to convince judges that the public should wait just a little bit longer. And if he can push it past November, that's mission accomplished. Because here's the dirty truth: Trump doesn't need to win every legal battle. He just needs to delay them until they don't matter. And once he's either back in the White House or out of the race, the consequences look very different. If he wins, he gains the power to influence the DOJ, appoint judges, and make sure these cases stay buried for good. If he loses, well, at least the information didn't cost him votes. That's the calculation. And here's the thing: Trump's strategy works because the system allows it. Courts move slowly, judges give time for appeals, lawyers can drag things out with procedural motions. Ordinary people don't get this luxury. If you or I tried to delay a case like this, we'd be shut down instantly. But Trump, with his money, his legal army, and his political influence, exploits every loophole to turn the legal system into a shield. It's not about proving innocence. It's about manipulating the process until accountability feels impossible. This is also why Trump constantly cries victim. Every delay, every sealed record, every buried document is framed as proof that he's under attack. He tells his base that the reason he fights so hard to keep things hidden is because the system is unfair, because he's being persecuted, because everything against him is a witch hunt. And ironically, that narrative makes it easier for him to hide. His supporters don't demand transparency. They accept secrecy because they've been convinced it's all part of some grand plot against him. That's the genius of his strategy. Not only does he delay the truth, he convinces millions of people not to care about it. Now think about the Epstein evidence specifically. Trump doesn't need the documents to prove his guilt or innocence. He just needs them locked away where the media can't report on them, where political opponents can't weaponize them, where voters can't question him, and every day they remain sealed is another day he gets to control the story. He gets to tell his version, without risking contradiction from sworn testimony or official records. That's not by accident. That's the strategy. The other part of this playbook is intimidation. Trump uses his platform to attack prosecutors, judges, and journalists. He makes it costly for anyone to go after him. By doing so, he creates an environment where people hesitate. Judges worry about being seen as political. Prosecutors worry about blowback. The result: more delays, more hesitation, more space for Trump to bury the truth. He weaponizes the system against itself, turning the fear of political consequences into yet another tool to keep evidence hidden. And let's be clear, this isn't just about Epstein. The Epstein records are one battle in a much larger war. Trump is fighting to keep control of his image. He's doing the same thing with his business fraud case in New York. He's doing the same thing with his criminal indictments over classified documents and January 6. Every single case involves the same tactic: delay, bury, stall, not forever, just long enough. Because if Trump can win the presidency again, the legal system becomes his playground. He can shut down investigations, pardon allies, appoint loyal judges, and make sure accountability never comes. That's why every delay matters. That's why every buried piece of evidence, including the Epstein material, is part of a bigger puzzle. The sad truth is this: Trump doesn't have to be smarter than the system. He just has to be shameless enough to exploit it. He knows the courts are slow. He knows the news cycle is fast. And he knows that if he can stretch out every case, every scandal, every piece of evidence, eventually people will move on. Outrage has an expiration date. And Trump's entire strategy is about reaching that date before the truth catches up. So when you see that Trump has buried Epstein evidence in court, don't look at it as some isolated event. Look at it as one more example of how he operates. Delay, deny, distract, repeat until the clock runs out. It's cynical, it's corrupt, but it's effective. And unless the system finds a way to move faster than Trump's stalling tactics, unless the public refuses to let outrage fade, the truth risks staying buried, not because it isn't there, but because he was able to run out the clock. The thing about Trump burying Epstein evidence is that it's not just about one case, or one man, or even one scandal. It's about what it says about the system we all live under. Because when someone like Trump can go into a courtroom, use his wealth, his lawyers, and his influence to keep evidence sealed, what it tells us is that there are two sets of rules in America. One for the powerful, and one for everyone else. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. You start to realize that this isn't only about Epstein, or Trump, or even politics. It's about justice itself, and whether it really exists when the people at the very top get to decide which truths the public is allowed to know. Imagine for a second that you or I were mentioned in Epstein's records. Do you think a judge would hesitate to release that information? Do you think lawyers would bend over backward to protect our reputation? Of course not. If our names were there, it would be plastered on headlines, pushed into the spotlight, and used against us instantly. The system would show us no mercy. But Trump gets time, he gets secrecy, he gets the benefit of the doubt, he gets the system to pause itself for his convenience. That's the bigger implication here. It's not just that Epstein evidence is buried, it's that the very act of burying it reveals the cracks in a justice system that claims to be equal but never really is. And this isn't just hypothetical. We've seen it before. We've seen powerful men protect each other, shield each other, and manipulate the truth until victims are silenced and accountability disappears. Epstein himself is the perfect example of that. For years, people knew. There were whispers, reports, allegations, evidence, and yet he kept operating because he had money, he had connections, he had people willing to look the other way. The system failed then, and it's failing again now, because the moment evidence is sealed to protect Trump or anyone else in that network, the message is loud and clear: power still buys silence. This should matter to everyone, regardless of political affiliation. Because if the truth about Epstein can be hidden to protect Trump, what else can be hidden to protect others? If evidence can be locked away because it's inconvenient for a presidential candidate, what does that say about the transparency of our democracy? We're told that justice is blind, that no one is above the law, that the truth always comes out. But what we're watching play out proves the opposite. Justice isn't blind. It sees exactly who you are, how much money you have, how many lawyers you can afford, and how much chaos you can create if held accountable. And Trump knows this. That's why his strategy works, because the system bends under pressure and he's willing to apply more pressure than anyone else. The implications also stretch far beyond the courtroom. Think about what this does to public trust. Every time evidence like this is sealed, every time accountability is delayed, more and more people lose faith in the system. They stop believing that the courts are fair. They stop believing that the truth matters. And when that trust erodes, democracy itself erodes with it. Because a democracy without trust in its institutions is just a performance, a show designed to make people think they have a voice while the real decisions are made in secret. That's what makes this so dangerous. It's not only about what's in the Epstein records. It's about the fact that people are being taught, once again, that the truth doesn't apply equally to everyone. There's another layer to this too. Buried evidence doesn't just protect Trump. It protects an entire class of people who were connected to Epstein. Because let's be honest, Trump isn't the only name in those files. We know Epstein's reach was wide. Politicians, businessmen, celebrities, even members of royalty have been connected. So when the evidence is locked away, it doesn't just save Trump. It saves all of them. And that tells you something very ugly about how power works. These people may fight publicly, they may be in different parties, they may claim to be rivals, but when it comes to protecting themselves, when it comes to keeping the public from knowing too much, suddenly they all benefit from the same secrecy. It's not about left or right. It's about up versus down, the powerful versus everyone else. And the Epstein evidence is just another reminder that when it counts, they close ranks to protect their own. And let's talk about the victims again. Because at the core of this story are real human beings whose lives were destroyed. They've waited years, sometimes decades, for justice. They've told their stories, faced scrutiny, endured public doubt, and still fought for the truth to come out. Every time evidence is buried, they're told their pain doesn't matter as much as protecting powerful men. Every sealed document is another reminder that their suffering is less important than someone else's reputation. And that's not just a legal failure. That's a moral failure, a society that protects predators and their enablers at the expense of victims is a society that has lost its way. So what are the broader implications of Trump burying Epstein evidence? It's that justice can be bought. It's that secrecy still wins. It's that the people at the top live by a different set of rules than the rest of us. It's that victims remain voiceless while predators remain powerful. And it's that democracy itself becomes weaker every time the truth is hidden from the people. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. If Trump succeeds now, if he manages to bury this evidence until after the election, and if he actually regains the presidency, what do you think happens then? Do you think the evidence suddenly comes out? Or do you think it gets buried deeper, locked away forever under the weight of executive power? This isn't just about a short-term delay. It's about whether the truth will ever see the light of day at all. Because once Trump has power again, accountability becomes nearly impossible. The broader implication is not just about this moment, it's about the future. About whether America becomes a place where truth is permanently optional, where justice is permanently selective, and where the powerful never, ever face consequences. That's why this story matters so much. Not because it's sensational, not because it's connected to Epstein, but because it's a test of whether justice in America still functions at all. Right now the answer doesn't look good, and unless people demand transparency, unless people refuse to let this stay buried, we risk losing not just the truth about Trump and Epstein, but the very idea that justice applies to everyone equally.